Have you ever been stuck between two choices on the LSAT and thought to yourself, they both seem right, so which one is actually wrong? Yeah, I'm talking about that moment. It's the worst, but it happens all the time. You read the question, you narrow it down, and then you freeze. Two choices, one has to be right, but they both kinda make sense. That's what I call the 50-50 trap. And here's the truth. It's not that you don't understand logic, it's that the LSAT is designed to make you second-guess yourself. So today, I want to give you 3 concrete tactics to handle that moment without guessing, without panicking, and without wasting minutes staring at the screen. These are the exact strategies I teach my own students, and they've helped people jump from the 140s into the 170s. Of course, these results are not guaranteed. Everyone's starting point is different, and your results will depend on your effort, your consistency, and how you apply the strategies. The first tactic is to diagram. When the choices involve formal logic, and I'm talking here if-then statements, you want to diagram them. I know it sounds like something from an intro logic class, but this is not about drawing fancy flowcharts. It's about seeing what's really being said. Let me give you an example. Suppose one choice says, if a company increases advertising, then sales will rise. And the other says, only if the company increases advertising will sales rise. They might sound identical, but they're not. In logical terms, they're actually saying the reverse of each other. One is saying A leads to B, the other is saying that B requires A. And if you don't write it down or sketch it out, you might end up just guessing. The LSAT is full of these traps. Same words, but the logic is flipped around. And that's why so many students think they're close, but they still miss the question. So here's the key takeaway. If you're stuck between two choices that both involve conditions, slow down and draw it, even if it takes you 15 seconds, because the people who consistently score 170 and above know when to go back to basics and they diagram when it counts. And if those words like unless, only if, or requires still trip you up, that's okay. It just means it's something for you to work on. It's not a flaw, it's just a skill that you haven't mastered yet. Now, the second tactic is something that almost nobody does, but it makes a huge difference. It's this, to compare the two answer choices directly. Not, does this one match the stimulus, and then, does that one match the stimulus? I'm talking about looking at them side by side and asking yourself, what is the difference between these two? Now, let's say you're down to these. Choice B says, the argument confuses a necessary condition for a sufficient one. And choice D says, the argument assumes that what's true of the parts is true of the whole. At first glance, they might both sound good, but they're pointing to completely different logical issues. So instead of picking the one that feels right, do this. Pause and break them down. What is choice B accusing the argument of doing? And what is choice D accusing it of? Then look at the stimulus and ask yourself, which of those things actually happened in the argument? This stops you from guessing, and it gets you thinking critically. Because here's what most students do. They look at each choice on its own in a vacuum. But the LSAT is testing your ability to see small differences. Sometimes it's a shift in verb tense. Sometimes one says some and the other says most. Sometimes one says supports the conclusion and the other says is the conclusion. And these differences matter. They're not just word games. They're how the test traps you. So if you're ever stuck between two, don't just ask yourself which one is right. Ask yourself, how are these two actually different? And that question changes everything. Now, tactic 3 is the most powerful of them all. And I'll be honest, most people don't do this one because it feels slow. But if you care about accuracy, this is the one. Here it is. Check every single word in the answer choice, every single one, and ask yourself, does the stimulus justify this? I know it sounds intense, but stay with me here. Here's what this looks like. Let's say the stimulus says, most cats like fish, and the choice says, most animals like fish. I know it's a subtle difference, but cats is a smaller group than animals, so that would be an overgeneralization. Now here's another one. If the stimulus says, some researchers believe, and the answer says, all researchers believe, again, big difference. And this is what the LSAT writers do. They change one word, just one word, and then the whole thing falls apart. So here's the rule. If even one word goes beyond what the stimulus supports, eliminate it. This tactic is perfect for the Socratic review method, when you're going over questions slowly after a timed section. That's when you train your brain to spot these traps, because you start to see patterns, like how wrong answers often use absolutes like always, never, everyone, and must, while correct answers are oftentimes more cautious, some, often, might, and can. This is especially the case for inference questions like must be true, most supported, and necessary assumption questions. I know it's subtle, but once you start seeing it, you'll never unsee it. Now remember that getting stuck between two answers doesn't mean you're bad at this. It just means you need a system for handling that moment. These tactics I shared today are habits, and like any habit, they get easier with practice. But if you apply these consistently, you'll stop saying, I was down to 2, and instead you'll start saying, I knew exactly why the wrong answer was wrong. And that is how your score starts to rise, not by doing 20 more practice tests, but by thinking better, question by question.